Hello, I'm Irene Renau.
And I am Rogelio Nazara.
We are going to talk about new verbs and dictionaries, a method for the automatic detection of neology in Spanish verbs. This study was made together with Ana Castro at the Catholic University of Valparaíso in Chile.
And we are financed by the government of Chile.
The outline of our presentation is as follows. We will start with introducing the problem of neology detection and especially why it's difficult to detect new verbs, and also why it is important for lexicographic teams to offer tools to automatic detection of neology. We will continue with a brief state-of-the-art in neology detection. We will detail our materials and methods, and we finally explain our results and evaluation together with some conclusions and future work. The current pandemic crisis is offering us an opportunity to observe the importance of new verbs. Almost every month, new verbs emerge in social media, the press, in internet in general. They are all around us, and we are observing how these words have a very important social role. It's not so common in lexicography that dictionaries are helping to the speakers to use these new words, to explain their meanings, etc., because they are not updated, or they are not updated as fast as we need. We observe in this slide an example of probably the most important word of the last 2 years. The word COVID it's a noun referring to the disease, and we are putting these 3 examples of 3 major Spanish dictionaries: the Clave dictionary, diccionaries.com, and a Mexican dictionary of Spanish. And in 2 of these 3 dictionaries, this word is not yet in the lemma list, in the list of head words. So this situation is very disappointing for the social role that lexicography has to play in situations like this, in a pandemic crisis, or when we are not in a crisis. In general, lexicography plays an important social role. So the methodology that we are going to explain tries to help lexicographic teams in this way. Regarding new verbs specifically, we have two situations to take into account. On the one hand, the morphological variation of even when the verb is regular, we find 50-something different forms for the same verb. For example, in this slide, we see the example of the verb cantar, which is a very regular verb in Spanish, of the first conjugation, the R conjugation. And but still, we have to deal with 50-something forms. On the other hand, we find that most of the new verbs are created with this conjugation. So they are regular, or they belong to the first conjugation, the R conjugation. So this is at the same time a difficulty and an opportunity for us, because what we have to do is basically to detect or to differentiate between the root and the regular inflection form. So, for example, in the case of the verb cuarentenar, which is a neologism, very recent neologism, meaning to put somebody in quarantine, this verb comes from the noun quarentena, quarantine, and it is created only adding the verb conjugation to the noun. So it would be really easy to detect this verb if we detect correctly the inflection of the verb, which is not exactly the case in the state of the art, as we will see later. So most of the verbs, as I was explaining, most of the verbs are created with the suffixes ificar, ear, izar, which belong to the first conjugation, and they are created by different mechanisms: prefixation, suffixation, parasynthesis, and loans. Only in the case of prefixation, we already have a verb. We add a prefix, and a new verb is created. For example, in this case, the example is actualizar, to update something. We have the prefix des, and we obtain desactualizar, meaning to outdate something. So it's the antonym. But in the other cases, we need to add the inflection of to a noun, to an adjective, to a noun. So as I was saying, we need to detect this difference between the root and the grammatical suffixes.
Regarding the state of the art in neology detection, most people apply what we call the lexicographic criterion, which is to contrast the list of words obtained from corpora with a list of words obtained from dictionaries. This way, they collect words that are not present in the dictionaries. This is a list of people applying this kind of approach, but we see the same idea coming in many other publications. Spanish offers many problems for morphosyntactic analyzers. It is one of the cases would be the case with pronominal verbs, which are verbs that have a pronoun attached to them. But there are also many instances of ambiguity, cases of nouns that could also be a verb form. In our method, we do not use part of speech tires or any other type of external resource. We only use the corpus, a very large corpus, which is the S1010 corpus, and also a dictionary, the Diccionario de la Lengua Española, or Dictionary of the Spanish Language, also known as the DLE. From the corpus, we obtain a list of verb forms, such as those shown in the screen. And what we do is, as my colleague already explained, is to try to identify verb endings in these forms. To that end, we compile a list of regular verb endings and also a list of pronouns, which are the enclitic pronouns that I already explained. As we can see here in the screen, we separate verb roots from the different verb endings. This allows us to compare the verbs we obtain from the corpus with the dictionaries. In some cases, we obtain verbs that are already in the dictionaries. It would be the case, for instance, in the case of the verb suprimir, which would be to delete in English. Suprimir is a regular verb, a normal verb, but we also find some verbs that are not in the dictionary. It would be the case of the verb rapear in Spanish, that would be simply to sing a rap. When we obtain different verb forms, different conjugated forms of a verb, as in the case of the example draftear, which is a loan verb from English to draft, as in to draft a document, we see that the verb appears with different verb endings in the corpus. We rebuild the infinitive form, trying one of the three possible forms in Spanish, that are, and ir, and we then, with the infinitive, we compare it with the dictionary. If it is already attested in the dictionary, then it is a verb. But if it is not, we consider it a candidate, a neologism candidate. With the list of all neologism candidates, we applied a battery of tests in order to reduce noise, because we observed that there are many forms that are not in the dictionaries because they are typing or spelling mistakes. So we applied a battery of tests in order to identify these instances and eliminate the candidates. The first one is to observe if the verb has a known prefix. If it has a prefix, then we consider it a probable candidate. as in the case it would be recalendarizar, no? With the prefix re, to recalendar. Then we look at things as a minimum length. It has to have at least 4 letters. We try reinserting letters, different letters, as in the case of the silent letter H in Spanish, which is a very common spelling mistake. And we also tried with different alternations of letters that have the same sound in Spanish, or at least in variations of Spanish. We also applied metrics of orthographic similarity, and finally, and the most computationally intensive of the test, is to examine the context of occurrence of the verb candidates. If the context of occurrence of the verb is the normal context of occurrence of a verb in Spanish, then we consider that it is probably a verb. Results and evaluation. We obtained more than 10,000 verb candidates. From those, 57% were already in the dictionary, and from this rest only 8% were selected as neologism candidates. The other 35% were instances of verbs that were considered spelling mistake. We manually examined approximately 4,000 of these non-registered verbs. We found that among the 8% of the neologism candidates, 88% were correct. And from all the candidates that were not in the dictionary, we found that 76% of the neologism were contained in this 8% that was selected by the algorithm. So it's a good performance. Here in this table we explain the different the performance of the different tests. Each of them had a good performance, in most of them in around 90% precision in the identification and elimination of spelling mistake. These are some examples. We find that the examples of the verbs that finally made it to the neologism candidate list, some of the typical mechanisms of neologism, such as prefixation, suffixation, parasynthesis, and loans.
Conclusions and future work. As we saw in our presentation, this method offers a systematic way to collect evidence on new verbs, to update lexicographic sources. We showed some examples that can be useful for include in dictionaries and to update them. We can also obtain information with this on the same method. We can also obtain information about obsolescent verbs, that is, verbs that are not in use anymore, that were present in the dictionary but were not present in the corpus. So this was an information that we weren't looking for. We found it, and we think that it could be an interesting line of future work. Other possible lines of future work would be to mitigate errors made by the algorithm. For example, problems with accentuation, also when the algorithm detected as a verb something that it was not a verb. For example, universar is not a verb, not new, not old. Also, another future work could be to apply similar methods to other categories. For example, it would be interesting to try the same method with adjectives. And finally, we could use the methods explored in this paper to develop a Spanish spell checker that we are already developing for Spanish. And this is another line of our work in our research group. That would be all. Thank you very much.
And please visit our website techlink.com for more information about our research programs.